The American president, known as Abraham Lincoln, was born on the 12th of February, 1809, in Hardin County, Kentucky. He was the second child of Thomas Lincoln and Nancy Hanks. Lincoln's parents were deeply religious, and their opposition to slavery had a profound effect on the young Abraham's beliefs. When he was 7 years old, his family moved to Indiana, where slavery was prohibited, and they established their own farm where he spent most of his childhood. Lincoln's early years were mostly spent working on the family farm, helping his father to clear land and plant crops. He received only several months of formal education, but he was an avid reader and spent countless hours teaching himself to read and write. Lincoln's mother died when he was only 9 years old, and this affected him deeply. His father remarried a year later, and the young Abraham formed a strong relationship with his stepmother, who encouraged his passion for reading and learning. As a young man, Lincoln moved to Illinois and tried his hand at a number of professions, including storekeeping, surveying, and he even served as a captain of the state militia during the Black Hawk War. In 1832, he decided to run for a seat in the Illinois House of Representatives. Although unsuccessful in his first attempt, Lincoln would run again in 1834 and win the election, serving 4 terms in the Illinois legislature until 1842. During his time in the state legislature, Lincoln studied law and began practicing in 1836. Over the next number of years, he would represent many clients at local, state, and Supreme Court levels. In 1839, Lincoln would meet his future wife, Mary Todd. They were married in 1842 and would go on to have 4 sons together. Unfortunately, only one of their sons, Robert Todd, would outlive them, with 3 of the boys dying before adulthood. Robert would go on to follow his father into politics and would serve as United States Secretary of War under President James Garfield. In 1846, Lincoln was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, where he quickly became known for his opposition to the expansion of slavery into new territories. He was a member of the Whig Party at the time, but he grew increasingly disillusioned with the party's stance on slavery. He was opposed to the institution, and he believed that it was morally wrong. In 1854, he gave a speech in which he criticized the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which allowed for the expansion of slavery into new territories. This speech helped to establish Lincoln as a leader within the anti-slavery movement. In 1860, Lincoln ran for president as the candidate of the newly formed Republican Party. He faced 3 other strong candidates, including John C. Breckinridge, who represented the Southern Democrats. Lincoln faced a difficult campaign, as the country was deeply divided over the issue of slavery and states' rights. Many Southern states, who felt their way of life was under threat, threatened to secede if Lincoln was elected. Despite winning only 40% of the popular vote, Lincoln won the electoral vote and was elected the 16th President of the United States. The Southern slave-holding states were outraged by Lincoln's appointment as president, and a number of them began seceding from the Union before his inauguration in March of 1861. The first 6 states to secede declared themselves as the Confederate States of America and elected Jefferson Davis, a former Secretary of War, as their president. In April 1861, just 6 weeks after Lincoln's inauguration, Confederate forces fired on Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor, South Carolina. Lincoln initially sought to maintain the Union through peaceful means, but events began escalating, and he became increasingly convinced that military action was necessary to preserve the integrity of the nation. On April 15, 1861, 3 days after the attack on Fort Sumter, Lincoln issued a call for 75,000 volunteers to serve in the Union Army and suppress the rebel Southern states. The actions at Fort Sumter and Lincoln's call to arms marked the beginning of the American Civil War. Throughout the war, Lincoln faced enormous challenges. He initially struggled to find effective military leaders who could deliver the victories needed to win the war, and he faced criticism from both the North and the South. Nevertheless, he worked tirelessly to preserve the Union and end slavery. In 1862, he signed the Emancipation Proclamation, which declared that all slaves in Confederate-held territory were to be freed. Although the proclamation did not immediately free any slaves, it signaled the end of slavery in the United States and helped to rally support for the Union cause. In November 1863, Lincoln traveled to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, to dedicate a new national cemetery for the thousands of soldiers who had died in the Battle of Gettysburg earlier that year. It was at this event that Lincoln delivered one of the most famous speeches in American history, the Gettysburg Address. In just a few short minutes, Lincoln captured the essence of the Civil War and the ideals for which the Union was fighting. He spoke of the need to preserve the principles of democracy, equality, and freedom, and he affirmed the belief that the United States was a nation conceived in liberty, and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. The Gettysburg Address was an inspiring and poignant tribute to the sacrifices of the soldiers who had given their lives in the war. It also served as a reminder of the larger purpose of the conflict and the importance of staying committed to the cause of freedom. In 1864, Lincoln found the commander he needed to bring final victory to the Union cause in General Ulysses S. Grant. Lincoln also ran for re-election in the same year, hoping to see the war through to the end as president. He defeated his opponent, General George B. McClellan, one of his former military commanders, thanks in part to the Union's success in the war and his ability to rally support from voters who were committed to the Union cause. Lincoln's second term was marked by continued military successes for the Union Army. In April 1865, Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered his forces to Union General Ulysses S. Grant, effectively ending the war. Lincoln's leadership and determination had played a critical role in the Union's victory, and his legacy as one of the country's greatest presidents was secured. Tragically, Lincoln's presidency came to a sudden and violent end just 5 days after Lee's surrender. On April 14, 1865, Lincoln and his wife attended a performance at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. During the play, John Wilkes Booth, a Confederate sympathizer and actor, entered the presidential box and shot Lincoln in the back of the head. Lincoln was rushed to a nearby boarding house, where he died the following day. His death shocked the nation and plunged the country into mourning. Booth was eventually captured and executed, but the damage had already been done. Lincoln's assassination marked the end of an era and left a lasting impact on American history. His legacy is one of courage, integrity, and leadership. He was a man of humble origins who rose to become one of the greatest presidents in American history. His leadership during the Civil War helped to preserve the Union and end slavery, and his words and deeds continue to inspire people around the world today. One of the most enduring symbols of Lincoln's legacy is the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. The memorial was dedicated in 1922, and it features a 19-foot statue of Lincoln seated in contemplation. The statue was carved from white Georgia marble, and it is surrounded by inscriptions of Lincoln's most famous speeches, including the Gettysburg and Second Inaugural Address. The Lincoln Memorial is visited by millions of people every year, and it stands as a testament to Lincoln's enduring influence on American history.